Would you explain the meaning of volunteering infrastructure and the role it can have for volunteering development?
Well, I suppose volunteering infrastructure are systems and structures and instruments that are in place that will facilitate volunteering. And I suppose if you look to see how that can facilitate it, if you think in terms of a structure, for example, your volunteering centres, they facilitate volunteers, they link them up with voluntary organisations, so they provide a structure within which volunteers find it easier to volunteer, and organisations who are looking for volunteers can find volunteers. And I suppose from the perspective of instruments, and that maybe I might look at more from a European perspective, what kind of instruments can we put in place to facilitate volunteering? Well, as you know, there are a number of programmes like the European Voluntary Service for young people, and under the Grundtvig programme there are programmes for older people. But equally, we could look at something like a charter for volunteers, or maybe some kind of European passport, a little bit like Europass. So there are various instruments that we could put in place at European level that would facilitate volunteering.
How the European Year of Volunteering 2011 can foster the development of volunteering infrastructure?
Well, I think the first thing, hopefully, that 2011 will do is it will create an awareness about volunteers and the work they do at national level in each country. And that's very important, because I think until you have that awareness and that appreciation, that it can be difficult sometimes to make the arguments for volunteering infrastructure. Because sometimes people think, I want to volunteer, that's a good thing, so let's just go and do it, don't make a big deal about it. But of course, the society we live in is quite complex. So therefore, in order to enable volunteers and in order to get the best from volunteers, we do need a volunteering infrastructure. So I think first of all, awareness, and then secondly, to look at maybe best practice in other countries to see what works elsewhere. We can learn from that and use that to improve our volunteering infrastructure. And I did also mention earlier the instruments that we can perhaps look at European level to try to ensure that those instruments foster volunteering. At a national level, you have your volunteer centres. We have a similar system in Ireland. In other countries, they have different systems. So I suppose it's to look at what is best elsewhere at European level and see what can we learn from that. I think that would be useful.
Which is the contribution volunteer support centres may give for 2011 to reach concrete results?
Well, of course, concrete results are what everybody wants, because while raising awareness is very important and has its own value, concrete results or achievements are what we look for. And I suppose one of the issues we face at European level, and I'll stay with the European level, is that there isn't a legal base for volunteering, which means the Commission's hands are tied pretty much when it comes to action. However, there is a legal base under the heading citizenship, and using that legal base, I think we can begin to move things forward somewhat at European level. And already I'm trying to put pressure on the Commission to look at the possibility of perhaps a green paper on volunteering after 2011. But as I said, the legal base is very important, because obviously the EU can't act if it doesn't have the competence, if it doesn't have the power. But that might be a sort of a concrete achievement. But equally, there are other things we can do as of now, even in the current circumstances. For example, in-kind contributions. That is where the work of volunteers is taken instead of matching funding. Now, those systems are already in place in many EU programmes, but some countries use them and some countries don't. So if we could encourage the different member states to use in-kind contributions as normally, as the normal way that they would go about it, then that could be very useful for volunteers and voluntary organisations, because resources obviously are at a premium. So again, another example is if we could, now this would be encouraging member states to look at issues like insurance where volunteers were concerned, and to try to get member states to move on that issue, because that's an issue, and certainly in very many countries. So there are concrete achievements that we can hope to achieve at the end of 2011. But it is ongoing, and as I said, the legal base creates a certain difficulty here, but it's not one that is insurmountable. If we deal with it under citizenship, then I think we can begin to move forward at European level.
And the last one. Which concrete influence 2011 will have on EU institutions and its policies, as well as national ones? Which outcomes, concrete outcomes on volunteers?
Well, again, I suppose that's a similar question to the last one. You're looking for concrete outcomes and on the various institutions, European and national. And one of the things I mentioned earlier was the various EU programs that are already in place. And I mentioned the European Voluntary Service and Grundtvig, which is I suppose, an instrument for older people. And I think that we need to promote, much more so at European level, opportunities for older people to become involved in volunteering, and also for intergenerational volunteering. And I would be hopeful, or at least I will propose, that such programs should be part, they are already part, Grundtvig already promotes older volunteering, but at quite a narrow level, or at a low level, and it's a narrow focus on it. I think there needs to be a much greater focus on it. And of course, in the EU, many of our programs are about mobility, going from one country to another and learning from best practice there. So that would be what I would hope might be a concrete objective, would be to increase the number of programs that facilitate volunteering, both for older people, younger people, and intergenerational volunteering, because intergenerational solidarity is absolutely crucial to the future of our societies. So given that, and promoting the in-kind contributions, hoping to persuade member states to look at the issue of insurance. As far as the issue of a charter is concerned, I believe there would be a difficulty at European level for 27 member states to look at a charter for volunteers. I think ideally in the long term, yes, that's something we can aim for. But to be perfectly honest, I don't think that in the short term we can manage that. But maybe a start on that might be something like Europass at the moment. I mentioned if we had a passport for volunteers, where volunteers could, if you like, in some way get credits or accredit their volunteering experiences, and that particularly for young people, would be available for their employers to increase their employability, etc. So I think there are a number of options there, but of course, like everything else, it will depend on the determination of those within the Parliament, and also of the voluntary organisations to push for this, both at Commission level and within the Parliament level.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.